Produced by Podcast Architects.
Welcome back to another episode of the Path Forward podcast, where we talk innovation and education. And this is our first virtual podcast, and I could not be more excited. So we have a guest that's a little further away from us. Dr. Rod Berger from Strategus is joining us virtually. Rod, thank you for being here. So I came across a couple of podcasts that Rod was leading, and like you said earlier when we were talking off air, you were actually the interviewer, not the interviewee. Now the tables are turned, and listening to some of your guests and the way that y'all engage about education in a wide variety of viewpoints and lenses, that struck me. So I wanted to reach out and say, hey, would you be willing to be a part? Because I think we have a lot to learn from others around the country, not just in Texas. And that was the reason. And I really appreciate you being here. But let's jump in, talk about your history, your career path. You have a variety of interests, and we'll talk about an upcoming trip here in the next couple of days that you let me in on. But where did you start, and where are you now, and what do you love to do?
Oh boy, that's a big question, Rick. But I do appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I like being a guinea pig here on the first virtual podcast. And you know what? Kudos to you as well. Former superintendent, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of superintendents and those in leadership positions who then extend that voice out so that we can all learn. So good on you. Gosh, my background, I've got my doctorate in clinical psych. I've worked in ed my whole career. You know, I had this crazy idea, Rick, years ago, many moons ago, prior to gray hair. I had a radio show, and I thought, gosh, what if I started podcasting in the education sector, right? And very quickly, it became something that was an amazing way to build a network and understanding of what's going on from many different levels and layers. And, you know, it's like, I don't know, 1,100 interviews,
wow.
You know,
and
counting.
You got a little bit of a lead on. You got a head start on us, I'll say that.
You know, I've developed some amazing relationships, and I've learned a lot. And, you know, sometimes the information gives me pause. Sometimes it is inspiring. But nevertheless, it is incredibly compelling to understand people's story. You know, that's my big thing, Rick. So when I think about Path Forward in the name of your show, for me, it's about, you know, left or right of center. Like, what is it about, you know, Rick Fernandez that sort of makes you tick? So that's the kind of stuff I'm really passionate about. And for me, I then extended that in the work that I do with Strategus, where I work with people in education on everything from branding to messaging to, you know, media campaigns and coaching. But you know, extending that into my writing. So I've been writing with Forbes for a number of years now, Entrepreneur Magazine, Parents Magazine, and a lot of times people will say, you know, namely my wife, why are you doing all that? But you know what? We're in a world and look, this is what students are doing. They understand the concept of media. They understand the concept of voice, and that you can have various mediums to be able to distribute that voice out. And it's a fantastic way to connect what you're thinking and also share the stories of others. So for me, they're interchangeable in that regard. Some take a little bit more time than others, but it is very, very compelling. At least selfishly on my end of it, I enjoy it. And I'm sure you will too, as you continue to dive into this podcast arena.
Now, take us back to high school, Rod. Where did you see your career going? Did you have an understanding of, all right, this is about what I want to do? Or did you just know, all right, I want to go to college. I know that, and then I'll figure it out from there?
Well, I'll go even further back. Even as a young kid, my dream was to be on 60 Minutes as a correspondent. And
I got to ask, your parents are big 60 Minutes fans?
Yeah, absolutely. And so as a young boy, I was watching 60 Minutes and Mike Wallace and all those guys. So that was always my dream as a kid, you know, and then I was an editor of the paper in high school. So that part of me was always there. I think the education side of it came through not only just doctoral work, but lots of volunteering that I had done growing up. And it was just a nice fit. I knew a lot of educators. And so it was just a good blend, you know, and I came up into the business side of education through really the RFP world, where lots of education companies needed my background to be able to not only consult, but, you know, from a submission standpoint. And so that was sort of my entry into the business side of things. But yeah, originally it was journalism all the way, every day.
That's funny. The RFP. I've just recently, as you mentioned, left the superintendency, joined Answer Advisory as a consultant, project manager, program manager, kind of all of the above, working towards building the entirety of an ecosystem for school districts. Because there's the planning, there's the building, and then there's really what matters, what's happening inside the classroom. So it's funny that you say the RFP process, because I'm starting to see quite a lot of those in my new role. And it seems like everybody's building across the country. Everybody's building or creating something. And it's been eye-opening, because when you're in education, you only see your lens, and as you're a principal or a teacher or superintendent, it grows a little bit, but you still don't get to see all the business aspects that are working towards, all right, these are the jobs of the future, so shouldn't we be connected? And that's pretty much the crux of why we started the podcast. Is I've got a bunch of friends and colleagues that are school superintendents in Texas, and I've always felt like there's a disconnect, right? So we have all of these programs, we have beautiful buildings, kids that need a direction and a path and their next step in their career or their college choice, and yet we don't leverage our business relationships to the degree that I think that we could or should. And so that led me to talking to our superintendents and saying, what are you doing that's innovative and really neat for your school district, and how can we help you with that? The big key that you hit on already is we don't do a good job of messaging, right? So I can imagine from that standpoint, you're probably quite busy, because we don't do a good job of that. And we don't tell our story very well. Now we're getting better, but there's a lot of us that don't know how to share all the good things that are happening, because you sure, as a superintendent, you sure get to hear all the bad things that are happening, whether you want to hear them or not. Tell me a couple of your case studies, if you don't mind sharing, with some of your districts and what you did for them, and how that helped them kind of spread their message or their brand, so parents are aware, kids are aware, the community is aware of the good things that are going on. Well,
so I'm going to approach that a little bit differently. So
sure.
I don't typically work directly with districts. It's normally with the company. It's really with the providers of solutions that then districts utilize. But what I can say is, in the number of superintendents that I have interviewed, in the hundreds over the years, sort of the back of the napkin conversations is, and it goes to your point about sort of the origins of Path Forward, and the conversations you've been having with, peers and colleagues across Texas, is this growing understanding from the superintendency position that voice matters, brand matters, and not from a platform of ego, but from a platform of inspiration, innovation, cultivating talent within the district. I think a lot of school boards are recognizing that the superintendent is much more than just a sort of a city manager to some degree, and that the more that you can get your superintendent, in essence, out there, the more you're just going to have more eyeballs on your district in a way that is really appealing. And so that's been something that I found to be very interesting. Just the number of superintendents that they really get that. They understand that when they're putting something out on LinkedIn, it matters. When they are commenting, it matters. When they're participating in, on Twitter or any other social platform, their voice is incredibly important and valuable. And I think that has changed communication strategies from the district side.
So you were in Tennessee or Florida?
I'm in Tennessee.
Tennessee. I had an opportunity to visit some of Nashville's schools. This is probably 5 or 6 years ago, looking at some of the career academies that were going on, and was very amazed and quite frankly, a little disappointed that Texas hadn't caught up with that. And I got to see some schools from around the city. But from your perspective, living in Nashville, what are some of the things in Tennessee that are innovative, creative? There's been some talk that Tennessee's now leading the way with some of the innovation that's going on, particularly in career and tech. But what do you see from your lens being there as a resident?
Well, you touched on something there at the end around career and tech. I will say I've had conversations with people in your state, leaders at the state level, Florida, California, around CTE. And that to me is incredibly inspiring, that whether it's been born out of the pandemic or not, it seems like states are really, really being thoughtful about their investments and understanding the connection. When we think about college and career readiness, is a much bigger and broader concept. and CTE apprenticeships, credentialing can really, really be an incredible driver for young people and their pursuit of professional goals. And so that is something in recent weeks that has really been, I think, eye-opening for me personally. I think our state here in Tennessee, that could be a very political discussion. I don't know how political we want to get.
Always is. Doesn't matter the state.
Right. So we are now looking at a $9 billion proposal for a new education plan by our governor, Governor Lee. There are people that are concerned about the role choice and charters are going to play in this new plan, where money is being allocated. I mean, we've got a lot going on in our state. And not for the better with regards to book bans, proposed book bans. So I think, time will tell kind of where we land. But a lot of the, this coming fall with school board elections, there's going to be, that's one thing I think, Rick, as I'm sort of meandering around your question in this regard, is that I'm very hopeful that citizens, not just in Tennessee, but across the country, realize that their vote for school boards, county commissioners seats, those are incredibly important. They play a role. And I think we've been I don't know if we've been disenfranchised with the power of the vote or where our voice lands, but we think about it at the federal level, the national level, the state level, but those local elections make a very big difference on what our kids are experiencing in schools and the types of environments that we are setting up. I mean, look, I'm sure you've seen it, especially any of us that are in the industry, but this concept of the big quit coming up. And that's a real thing. I mean, I know in my kids' elementary school, my daughter's a first grader, and one of the first grade teachers put in her notice, and I believe it was not even like a 2-week notice or an end of school year notice. It was just basically, I'm out. The principal took an quote unquote early retirement. These are real issues, and the way in which we support superintendents, teachers, building level leaders, it really makes a big difference. So it just so happens that Tennessee is front and center for many of these discussions. We had Douglas County, Colorado recently, where there was a flip in the school board and then they terminated the superintendent. So this is a very hot industry that we're in, and maybe not for the better in that regard. But that is, look, there is reality.
No, I would agree 100%. We're seeing very similar things in Texas. I mean, there's been a mass exodus of superintendents. Seems like every day I learn of another colleague saying, hey, thanks, but no thanks. And in Texas, we were underproducing teachers by about 35,000 a year pre-pandemic. And now I can't imagine what that number is. And so I was telling a buddy the other day that I could imagine that a district tries to open next year and doesn't have the staff to even open a building. Right. So if you have an elementary or a middle school and you don't have enough people there to even safely man the building, I can see that happening, because where's everybody finding the new crop of teachers? They're just not coming out of the university system anymore. And we're as a high school principal, we're so used to playing the chess game at the beginning of the day. If a number of teachers are out or what have you, you kind of move and shuffle if substitutes don't show up. And we've been able to manage, right? It's not fun. It's not ideal for the kids, but you can manage. But now we're talking about you don't have any substitutes and your teachers are leaving and your classes are all of a sudden ballooning into the 30s, the 40s. So we do need to start thinking about what are we doing or what can we do to mitigate that issue, but also the profession. At what point are we going to start thinking about how are we paying, how are we incentivizing? As much as teachers have a heart for kids and are not doing it for the money, there's also the strain and the wear and tear.
There are realities.
It's tough. And, superintendents are the highest paid in the district, but your teachers are out there, scrapping and scraping, from some $50,000 a year trying to feed a family. So it just the math doesn't make sense for some folks. So we're seeing very similar things. You mentioned the book banning, the charter school. We have charters, that have a little bit different rule set to play from our state agency that us public school folks are a little, is that quite fair in the distribution and the accountability piece of the equation? So we do have those conversations and are very interested to see how that plays out in the legislature. But It's interesting that the problems are so similar. No matter where you go, it's the same kind of problems, which brings us back to the point, like, what are we not thinking about? What are we not doing? What are we not leveraging? And I always believe it's industry, because they have space, they have resources, they have a vested interest to find the next group of workers for the industry. But I just think that there's something there that we are clearly missing. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but as I talk to different folks, there's always the higher ed blames whatever didn't happen on the K-12 group, right? So, you didn't prepare them. And then they get out into the workforce, and the workforce blames, hey, colleges didn't prepare them. The kids don't know that they have skills, they can't communicate. And so we keep blaming each other, yet we don't sit at the same table and talk. Or if we do, it's just a cursory advisory board or something. But the real work is not happening. And I don't understand why.
See, that's where, Rick, yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No,
I think that's
good.
where I think that's where CTE comes in and can be not a Band-Aid, but a bridge, because I can tell you firsthand the discussions that I've had over the last month with state commissioners in the labor side of it, higher ed, the LEAs, and they're having not just conversations, but they've created oversight. They've created, paths where we've got sort of kids, they have immediate ability with CTE to be dropped into public works programs and projects that have runways and budgets and no debt. I mean, things that really answer the bell, I think. So that's one area that, if I'm thinking about the sector in general, that gives me a lot of hope. But you're right. I mean, to me, when we've got this many issues in all these districts, there's something wrong with the assumptions that we're making when we think about how to educate somebody.
So let me ask you from a parent perspective. I think part of our problem is we don't know how to brand the career choices appropriately. And what I mean by that is, when you're selling it to kids and you want them to be excited about it, but you're also selling it to parents. And I think some of our parents there's a stigma there, right? With career, it's the blue collar kids, or it's the kids that are not going to go to college or can't go to college. And we haven't made that switch or changed that mental model for our parents. And then that hopefully that would trickle down into our students. But our parents still see career in tech and imagine what they had in high school, right? So wood shop or, auto tech, and just changing oil or spark plugs. And the reality of that is it's not even close to any of that now. It is so far beyond that. And, God love our LEAs, but they don't have the time or the resources or the know-how to brand it appropriately and pull in industry to say, hey, come help me with this and show our kids and our parents exactly what it is. And let's start giving them a true picture of what auto tech is, because it's all digital. I mean, it's not, you're not changing oil. There's all kind of systems and that have to be upgraded, integrated, all that stuff. From your standpoint as a parent, what do we need to do to make that message kind of sink in, where some of our parents will take another look at career tech?
I think it's a great question, Rick. I think that it actually, you hit on it briefly there, but I think it's at first blush, it's a marketing issue, right? We inherently have an issue in this country with understanding how we respect teachers, how we respect the role education plays. And we've gotten really, really, I'm going to use this term, so I'll use it. I'll get in trouble. We've gotten lazy in general, I think, as a citizenry, because we've thought of education as an extension of daycare, right? In essence, I don't really want to know what's going on with my kid during the day. I just want to know that the end result means that they're being educated and we're moving them down the sort of the pipeline, right? And that's the reality. Anybody tells me differently, I think they're foolish. They're full of it in that regard, right? It's how do we understand this? I mean, you've got countries in Europe that have had apprenticeship systems in place for decades, right? And you've seen how that has impacted the awareness, the pride for those industries. And you're exactly right around digital. And all the discussions I had with states about CTE, that was the number one request that they're getting from industry. Digital, right? That's going to change the face of CTE. But, this is where, if we don't tell a better story about what it takes, not only to become a teacher, but the value and what you can do. I mean, why aren't we thinking about creating different off ramps and on ramps. Why is it that Dr. Rick Fernandez should be a superintendent? And then it's like, well, I don't know what else. I kind of want to do something different. Well, why can't you spend a few years out of the superintendency building up other skills, and then you come back into the system? And the same for teachers. I mean, that's how the rest of the world works, right? We're not, think about that as a pitch to a young person considering being a teacher. All right, Rick. So, Rick, you're in college and we're going to say to you, you want to be a teacher. All right. That's a 30-year runway. That, how appealing that is. Think about how appealing that is to any kid out there in America, let alone the world. Where in the world do we say you're going to be in something for 30 years where your pay increase or your economic opportunity is going to be so small? Nobody. You take away the label of being a teacher or being an administrator, who's going to sign up for that? That's not 2022. That's not 21st century thinking, right? That's not understanding economic development, right? Why? We just don't have a very good understanding about it. And so I think it starts there, because if we don't have that sort of belief in the people that are in front of our kids, then we're going to struggle to then support our kids in these programs that we're hearing about from the teachers or the building level leaders. So it is a huge marketing issue look, higher ed is facing a crisis. They all know that. That's not breaking news. How many young people are saying, I don't know, should I go to a 4-year? Maybe I should go to community college. Let me get some of these basic courses out of the way, because I'm not going to take a job that I can't afford to take because of the loans that I have digested, right? Kids are getting smart. They're getting so much smarter. They understand they don't need the things that we're offering.
I couldn't nail on the head. And what's interesting is industry has already realized that. And so from the folks I'm talking to, they're revamping what the barriers are, the minimum education required, or, hey, this is one pathway to the job, but here are 3 other pathways. And it's usually involved with, do you have the skills and can you communicate and can you work on a team? And if you can do those 3 and you're coachable, I got a place for you. So industry's already realized that and is making the shift, or has made the shift, and yet it's taking us so long to figure that out in terms of the education side of it. And I just don't understand why that change is so difficult to come by. And I know things turn slowly and there's a lot of bureaucracy involved, but if there was ever an impetus to do that, we're living it, right? We're in the middle of it. So let's go ahead and make that move. Let's do that now, as opposed to waiting 10 years. Then when we don't need it anymore, there's already something else has changed. So it's good to hear from a parent perspective, because that's a lot of the battle of trying to having a lot of experience with some innovative programming here in Texas, with some Energy Academy that I created in a former school district. Great superintendent, very progressive, kind of let me run wild with it. But we had a partnership with an energy company, midstream oil and gas, that were willing to take our kids onto their headquarters daily, freshmen, mind you, to learn alongside of their employees, right? And there's all the questions of how you're going to do it and the safety and all. But they sat down and we worked through piece by piece by piece by piece and got to a point where let's do this. And it's just those little things, those little relationships. It doesn't take that much innovation. It just takes a little bit more work than we've been putting in, and the realization that we got to do that work, because if we don't, everybody suffers. Colleges, K-12, and the job market suffers. You've had some very interesting guests. Who have been your favorite? Do you have a group? I don't want to make you choose one person, but do you have a group who kind of gets you out of the box and really pushes on you during conversations?
I mean, look, I have been incredibly blessed with guests that I never thought that I would have. Early on, I had a chance to interview on a couple of different occasions the late Sir Ken Robinson.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Incredible experience. I interviewed him first on camera, and then we did Zoom interviews, and I was actually fortunate enough to share a glass of wine with him and his wife at one point. So, that was just amazing to be able to spend that time with him. Who else? Sugata Mitra, the TED Talk Prize winner, the Hole in the Wall experiment in India. Fascinating man. And he was actually, here's the power, right? So sometimes there are perks, Rick, to putting in all this extra time in podcasting and writing articles. But a number of years ago when I was going to BET in London, do you know the conference BET?
I do not.
You should check it out. So BETT.
Okay.
It is the largest education conference in the world. Normally it takes place in January, but because of COVID and everything else, it's going to be in March of this year. But I had the chance to go. Dr. Mitra, he invited me up to Newcastle in Northern England, where they had the first school in the cloud, which was the product of the winning the grand prize for the TED Talks. And so I got to go up there and watch a lesson with these young people that they did just for me, and it was amazing to see how these kids self-organized. Do you know the hole in the wall experiment?
Yes. But I'm just amazed that you got to go see that firsthand. That is unbelievable.
Yeah, he was amazing. And so that's been great. I have expanded. I've been, I've interviewed now athletes and music producers and politicians. So it kind of continues to expand in very unique, I think, in different ways. An interview I did recently, I interviewed one of the founders of Pixar. And it was just to hear about Steve Jobs back in the day and when they were building Pixar and sort of the struggles and the internal battles. And, thank goodness they solved it because my kids and everybody else's kids are happy that
Toy Stories saved me a lot of times. So I'll just say that.
Right. That's right. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Sir Ken comes to mind. Sugata Mitra comes to mind, especially in the education space. The former Solicitor General Ted Olson, who was a part of, Bush v. Gore, right, and the hanging chads and everything. I got to interview him. That was pretty incredible to interview him a number of years ago. I've been very, very blessed to interview and be in front of some fascinating people.
Now, do you have one guilty pleasure that you'd want to do an interview that's totally out of somebody that knows you well would not guess that you want to interview this person just to have fun?
Just to have fun. Well, let me see. Well, I'm a huge sports nut, so it would probably be an athlete.
Okay, so am I.
I don't know. It'd be or a coach, right? A coach or an athlete.
Okay, who would you
would
pick?
Be pretty fascinating.
You're not going to say Peyton Manning, are you? Because you're from Tennessee. I don't want to hear that.
Nah. Well, I'm from Detroit originally, so it'd be a bad boy like Isaiah Thomas or Joe Dumars or Dennis Rodman. Chuck Daly, he passed years ago, but it probably would have been Chuck Daly. So yeah, any really athlete is fascinating to me because I've just, that was my savior growing up was, dialing into sports, and that just, sports can be addicting in a good way. I'm not about gambling. I know gambling's a big part of sports now, but just the emotional connection you have with teams. They were very important for me as a young person. So yeah, it'd probably be an athlete.
Sports is, I played college basketball for Sam Houston State, which is a Division I here in Texas. They're now in the WAC. They were, at the time, we were Southland Conference, and was very fortunate to win a conference championship and still have a lot of relationships through basketball. Loved it, still love it. Excited about March Madness as always. But I always use that as a frame of reference in the coaching, right? Because when you're training teachers or principals or whomever, it's the same exact thing. But we can't seem to make that mental leap. And what I mean by that is, if your kid's playing basketball, you would expect that coach every single day to give some feedback. Every single day. Like if you walked out of practice and the coach was not saying anything to any of the players, you'd be like, what's going on? And then we have this kind of attitude in teaching that it's kind of a hands off, and we've got to make sure. And if it's too regular, or if it's, I think that's holding us back a little bit. I think that if we frame it as when you come into any profession, you should be getting coached very regularly, or else how do you get better? And building that into what we do as a part of education, I think that's missing, because not only are teachers leaving because of the strain and the everything that's going on in the education space, but they're also leaving because if you don't get any coaching, you don't get any validation, you don't get to grow then where's the fulfillment in something that you love? And basketball has always been an easy corollary for me to draw from. But I didn't. So Detroit. So I would be dying. I would die to know what really happened between Isaiah and Jordan with the Olympics. Him being left off the Olympic team.
The walk off.
Yes.
So I was a ball boy. All right. So I'll date myself here. I got to be a ball boy for the Pistons for one game. We were 2-time defending champs. It was the spring of the following season. So we were still defending champs.
Okay.
So it was like April. So we were like approaching the playoffs. It's the last home game against the Bulls. Now the Bulls ended up winning their first championship against the Lakers, right? You've got the underhand Jordan famous highlight. And I got to be a ball boy for that game.
What?
At the Palace. Yeah. Amazing.
Really?
Yeah.
How old were you?
Never forget it. I was 14?
Do you remember it well enough to sense like was the rivalry what everybody made it out to be? Was it that violent?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, okay, so let's see if you remember this, because I think he went to Texas. The name William Bedford.
Yeah.
So he was on the Pistons. He struggled his career, never kind of went where he wanted it to go. That's a conversation for another day. But big guy, right? At 7 foot, probably, whatever he was. And so I'm, sort of, trying to be, I'm the 14-year-old just rebounding pregame. You're just trying to get the ball out quickly to these guys. And I turned around and I fired a ball at him and he wasn't looking and I hit him in the face. Right. So fast forward a couple moments or whatever. And I'm facing the basket looking for more rebounds or whatever. Just of course, embarrassed. You hit a professional athlete. All of a sudden I could hear Rick. I could feel like this huge, like it was like boom, like the floor was like just, shaking. And I look and he's jumping over me. And he dunked on me and he starts laughing, right? He just thought it was so funny to scare this 14-year-old kid, right? It was amazing, but it was like a herd of elephants, like just, pounding that wood floor, amazing experience.
That's what a great memory. I mean, I would kill to be a ball boy, particularly during those times. I mean, I'm 80s, 90s. That's when if I had to go back and watch any games, it would be from those periods. I mean, I was a huge Pistons fan with Dumars. I wasn't much of a Jordan fan till later. I didn't appreciate it till later. But during that time, I was Celtics, Pistons, and like the Atlanta Hawks. The Rockets were okay. Even being from Houston, they just weren't very good up until the 90s, obviously. So sports has been a big motivator for me as a young kid, and I can't imagine on the Pistons floor. That's just amazing to me. That first of all, it's amazing to hit him in the face. At least it wasn't Isaiah or Dumars or somebody, or no worse. At least it wasn't Lambeer.
Oh yeah, he couldn't have been nicer. I actually sat at a Lions game, and Lambeer was sitting directly behind me when I was a kid, and I didn't even enjoy the football game because I was so nervous and I wanted to talk to Bill Lambeer and I didn't. I was just terrified. But his knees were like, he's so big. His knees were like around my. You're sitting at the Silverdome.
Oh my goodness. So, all right, I got to ask you then, best of all time. Give me your top 3 if you have to choose.
Best players of all time?
All right. Oh, we can just do the LeBron Jordan debate real quick. Is it Jordan or is it LeBron?
Oh gosh, I think they're just totally different players. Like I have a great appreciation for them now as an adult for both of them. LeBron came in when my Pistons won their last title in 2004. Now
that was a great team. I mean, just from a basket, like there was no stars. They were just sharing the ball. Rip Hamilton, those guys. I mean, that was a great team. As a coach, seeing the success from that team is something you could always point to. Say, look, they just shared the ball. They did the work, right?
So, they did the work, yeah. I don't know top 3. I mean, I think Jordan's there, LeBron is there. I think it's all about stats. Everybody talks about stats, and I just think they're different eras. Who do I enjoy watching more, just from a basketball standpoint?
Sure,
probably Jordan over a LeBron. But LeBron's amazing. He's going to have every record known to man. So, kudos to him. So it's, Kobe was incredible, amazing, right? So just Oscar Robertson, all these guys. So.
Well, so you're going to Africa. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I had done a couple of pieces in Forbes about some different programs in Africa, and I got, I had an email a couple of weeks ago asking if I would come and tell some stories about a local community in Senegal. So, and I can share with you, Rick, that I just raced here for the interview after getting 6 vaccinations. So I was told that I was told the next couple of days could be a little bit rough, but polio, typhoid, yellow fever, meningitis, it's just, but 6.
So did they give you a seat cushion to come sit down on, or did you get some in the arm? That seems like a lot.
All in the arms here. Okay. So yeah, but it's an opportunity of a lifetime to go and learn about culture and to see what they've done in healthcare and education. And, one of the reasons why they've got a new school is to help prevent child marriage, so that young girls, are protected in that regard. So I don't know what I don't know. And that's actually exciting to me because I want to be able to be sort of an open book in understanding a different culture. So yeah, that's coming up very shortly here in a couple of weeks.
So I got to ask you a married guy question. So when those opportunities come up, and you can tell me, hey, don't air this, but I'm always curious, right? Because I like to travel, and work sometimes requires you to do that, right? So how do you have that How does that conversation go when you walk in the door? Like, hey, I've got this amazing opportunity. Oh, where are you going? You got any pointers from a?
Fair question. I don't know if I have, as you see me take a drink of water for those. Yeah, look, I think it's, from the coaching mentality or the team mentality, it's, it's a team effort in that regard. So,
no doubt.
From my vantage point, I mean, yeah, she also knows my dreams and things that I want to do. And it's not the first time that I've traveled. I've never been to Africa, but, many times to Europe, and this is just sort of, another trip in that regard. I will say though, Rick, I don't know about you, but I'm incredibly domestic. So that does help. I think that does sort of grease the wheels. Like I do all the laundry in the house, grocery shop. So I don't know if that's up to, if you're doing that.
That is a good balance then. You definitely doing your share at the house, no doubt.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. No, I always ask them. So, and sometimes people are like, why are you asking that? Like, I'm just curious, making sure at least I'm somewhat trying to learn some things as I go through the process, right? I mean, we've been married 13 years and she's very supportive and going from education to something brand new. It's a big step. And so you got to have the right person to support that decision and see the big picture and the podcasting is in it. Like, why are you doing that? Is that making you do it? Like, no, I just enjoy it. And there's something here that we need to share, particularly with education, I believe. So I can definitely relate to that piece of it. So give me your piece of advice for this generation coming into the workforce. You mentioned you write for Forbes. You've been able to have, from my understanding, a lot of incredible experiences, but there's been sacrifices along the way. What would you tell the kids coming into the workforce if they had the goals or the aspirations for similar things that you've been able to do in your career?
I think how I will approach that. So I've been doing it now. I think it's 13 years or so. I'll guest lecture every summer with grad students at the business school at Vanderbilt. And I really enjoy that work. And part of that work is I get copies of their resumes. I want to get to know who they are prior to my experience with them. And my goodness, Rick, maybe not every one of them, but the majority of them, they bury the lead. So we sort of, bring in, journalism into this conversation. They bury the lead as to who they are and what they value and what they appreciate and where they think they're sort of talented. A young person's resume is typically what they think we want. Right. And yet the fascinating aspects of their lives is literally buried underneath that they're proficient in Microsoft Excel and, semi-proficient in a second language. And you think, well, wait a minute. No, look, if I want to know more about Rick Fernandez, I'd like to know more about his role as a student athlete in college. That's interesting to me. I can talk to a superintendent, but I can't always talk to a student athlete who has, a real understanding and appreciation for balancing what it meant to be a male, an athlete on in a college setting, how people took you serious or they did not when you then transferred over to a career outside of basketball. And that's the kind of thing when it comes to this next generation is, look, adults, we don't know what we're doing in a lot of ways, right? And the young people, they have some fantastic ideas. And so really, I'm just a big believer in say yes to as many things as you can. You'll figure it out later. But be multidimensional. The days of sort of doing one, stock and trade, I just think are sort of over. You're going to have many careers. More of us are going to live like a Forrest Gump than we're not, and enjoy that, celebrate the narrative of that, and let people know. I just had that the other day. I found out from a young man who I'm a big fan of, who's actually going to be going to Africa with me. He produces my podcast. And I found out that he had been in a nonprofit that was supporting Haiti for years. And I had no idea that this was what he was. And I said to him, I said, man, you're bearing the lead. Like, that's really interesting. That speaks about commitment at an early age and just sort of a global mindset. And so that would be my advice is very rarely do we do things that don't bring value when we think about our own story. So don't be afraid to share it, because you never know who is going to be on the other end of that message that's going to then sort of gravitate to you because of that experience.
That's interesting. That's a great point. That's even a great point for not only students, but for anyone really in the workforce that's changing or making decisions on, is this the best place for me? Am I passionate about this work? I think that's great advice all around, not just for students. So 5 years down the road, where's Rod? Where is Dr. Berger at?
Now, Rick, that's a loaded question.
You could just say I'll be sidelined at the volunteer game or go baseball.
No, here's what I would say. I do say this to my wife quite often because I did coach my sons. The elementary school has their own basketball league, and he's a third grader, and so we lost in the first round of the tournament. But I think I got more out of that than even the boys. I just love coaching. Is that if I ever won the lotto, I don't play the lotto, but if I did and it was substantial, I think I would drop everything and I'd be a coach. I'd go to like the local middle school or high school and say, look, don't pay me. Just let me sit on the bench and coach one or two or help out in any way that I can. I love coaching in that regard. So that's what I would do in sort of that scenario.
Basketball?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Gosh, 5 years professionally. Look, I don't, I even as a kid, Rick, I grew up as a dreamer. That hasn't left me. So I continue to aspire to the next conversation, the next interview, the next discussion. And I think all of these things stitch together, right? They all play a role in me improving my skill or, an opportunity. Right. I mean, I opened an email that I thought potentially was a spam email, and all of a sudden I've got, I'm going to Africa in a couple of weeks. Right. So I think it's just being open to those things and seeing where it takes me. Probably even more writing. I just love being able to tell stories. I've been asked to be a producer on a documentary film that looks at change around the world with a director who has done some amazing things. He directed Brave Blue World on Netflix about the water shortage on planet Earth. So yeah, I want to continue to be creative in that regard, whether that's, messaging with a client and the support of branding and figuring out what story makes the most strategic sense. Because I love being, strategy for me is my brain can't turn that off. So I love that. And so it's that hybrid or that blend of strategy and creativity. And so wherever that takes me, I'll be hopefully ready and prepared.
Well, just hearing some of your adventures and your career path, I mean, that gives me a lot of inspiration because I'm on a new journey, and this podcasting is something that I never thought to do. It was just a means to an end because we didn't have anything in my former school district to be able to share the good news. And then it's kind of spiraled in a good way, and I'm going to continue down that path and see where it leads. Because the thing for me more than anything is that every time I have a conversation, I'm learning a great deal, right? I mean, even listening to you and your path with telling a story is so critical. And whether you do it in print, whether you do it, with what you say or your branding, I think our schools and our universities need to really consider how they're doing that or how they're not doing that, because that's what speaks to kids. That's what speaks, I think, to everyone at this point in our history. So I don't know. It's been an honor for me to spend some time with you. I didn't want to keep you this long.
You're fine. Hey, we're on the same team. You don't have to say it's an honor from my direction. I mean, it just means I'm a glutton for punishment that I've been doing it this long in that regard. Like you and I are the same cloth. We're made from the same in that regard. So look, this is a shared medium. I think I would encourage you to keep doing even more from the digital and the remote interviews, because it will expand the opportunity beyond Texas. And you'll find, to your earlier point, wow, there's so many issues that are very similar when you cross state lines. And to that point, I would say you ought to check out Dr. Randy Ziegenfuss and his The Human School, I believe, is the new project. He was a superintendent. He retired last year out of Pennsylvania. But I think that would be a really good conversation for you as we're wrapping up and sharing. See, this is what it's like to the audience. It's about, I think, shared resources and voices, because that's how any of us kind of move this train along the path.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. My next, I think, challenge is I really am very excited about the potential for what the blockchain technology can do for our students and the learning. And I don't want to get into all the finance, whether you believe it's worthwhile in terms of Bitcoin and all that stuff, but just the technology behind it. I think it will in some way it's going to impact kids and their future and how they do business and how we keep records and everything in between. So working on a couple of things with some schools on getting that in the hands of students, because I don't think it's going anywhere, quite frankly. So having other people to help with the connections, the building, and the recommendations on, hey, you really need to go check out this person or that person. It just helps me expand my understanding and my knowledge. So I took a long way around to say thank you for the recommendations. And if there are things that you feel like are worthwhile, I like to be a vacuum and try to suck up as much as possible, because we're lifelong learners, or we should be anyway.
We should be.
No doubt. Any shout outs you want to send or any branding opportunities?
Any branding? No, not necessarily. I will tell you one of my favorite writers that I've become friends with, Joe Napolitano at the 74 Million. Check out Joe, J-O. She had an amazing story yesterday about students here that are of Ukrainian descent and the challenges that they're facing when they're seeing over text what's going on with family members in their homeland. And she's also writing about some really tough stuff in districts across the country. So she's my new fave in that way, just a really good human who's doing some amazing work. Dr. Ziegenfuss, like I mentioned, Randy and what he's up to. There are countless ones. I mean, I could give you a list and go on and on and on, but in your state, Dr. Quentin Shepard, Victoria Independent School
Texas,
District.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Quentin. He's an amazing guy.
He's a prolific writer.
He's a prolific writer, and I love that he's not shy with opinions. I think we need that. I think sort of playing PC just for PC's sake doesn't really help anybody, and he's a leader. I mean, I've seen so many superintendents that follow his advice in that regard. So he's, someone that I'm really, I'm happy that I've gotten to know over the last couple of years.
Very cool. Yeah, no, it's amazing that those small pieces and those small connected pieces from person to person, how much of an impact that makes. But like you mentioned, Dr. Shepard, like I had no frame of reference for him. And I saw a couple of years ago, he was the superintendent, and then he started publishing things and a newsletter here and a word there and something on LinkedIn. And you start to get a sense of who somebody is from that, right? The opinions. And it's just amazing what you identify with and what you try to take. It's like, I need to do more of that, right? I need to take some of what he's doing and really have a very focused message for the community that I'm serving. And I think he's done a heck of a job with that. So you're right on point with that. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time. It's been great for me, and I hope you had a little bit of fun being on the other side of the table.